Hey Ribs, we're here today with Dr. Green, one of our faculty members at Ole Miss, and today we're asking her about one of our study abroad programs. Dr. Green, would you like to introduce your program to us?
Sure. I'm Angela Green. I'm in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, and I teach a 2-week program that goes to Greece in June, from June 6th through the 21st of 2025. The 6th will be the day that we start the class, so students should expect to leave on the 5th to get there. And it's about comparing democracies in ancient Greece as well as contemporary Greece and contemporary America. And so it's cultural immersion, but its central focus is about getting students to see where our own democracy and many aspects of our own culture come from. So.
What inspired you to develop this trip to Greece?
Well, I've always wanted to go to Greece, and so the trip is made twice now. The first time was in 2020, which, as you may recall, was a pretty inauspicious year for study abroad because we went and we came back and we had COVID. And we didn't actually have COVID, but we came back in the midst of quarantine. So it took a few years for the program to get back off the ground, and so last year we went again, and I had 14 students. I just am a big believer in democracy, and I know that I never thought that in my lifetime that would be a controversial position, but I really feel like it's more important now than ever for students to really think about what it is when we say we have a democracy and what it takes to keep one. Because when we go to Greece, we see firsthand historical evidence of democracies that have failed as well as those that have succeeded. And so I think that there's a whole lot to learn from just comparing and thinking deeply about what we mean when we talk about democracy.
Just in case students are worried, what measures are in place to ensure student safety on your trip?
One thing that people should know, if they don't already, is that Greece is one of the safest countries in all of the world. And so crime is, if you're thinking of safety in terms of crime, it's negligible except for some, pickpocketing and the like. So that's what I try to prepare students for, is just keeping their own personal belongings safe. And we also have partners on the ground in Athens, college here in Athens, and they are fully equipped to handle any emergency, safety related or otherwise. And so that's who we're staying with practically. I mean, they put us up in apartments, but they're on hand 24/7 to handle anything that comes up. But safety has not been a concern on the 2 trips that I've taken with students so far. One student in 2020 got pickpocketed on the subway, but it was a small amount and distressing, but not in the end terribly significant. It didn't mar the experience for her.
So what kind of accommodation can students expect when in Athens?
Well, as I said, our hosts put us up in apartments, and so students will share apartments depending on the breakout of the students. This year we had 14 students and 12 of them were women. So the 2 men were in an apartment by themselves, and everyone else was in apartments with 3 or 5 people. They're right near each other. They're near where we meet up every morning. And students really love having the experience of living like they're living in a city, a big city. And so it's, so far, they have not complained about the accommodations at all.
Could you share with us one of the most exciting aspects about the trip that you have had in the past?
Well, let's see. There's lots of exciting moments, and there are lots of highlights, and students tend to be pretty enthusiastic about the whole trip. But I would say this time, going to a cooking class together very early in our journey was really instrumental to the whole class just cohering as a group. In fact, many students came away from that feeling like we were already family. They used that word. And so it was a great bonding experience, but it also gave us a real literal taste of the culture. And it was something that students had already expressed an interest in before going on the trip. So now I've made it a regular part of the journey. So that's just one highlight. Also, there was an opera happening while we were there, and so I asked students if they wanted to go with me, and I went to the opera, and about five students joined me there. So that was just a sort of add-on, an extracurricular. Other students found tickets and went to see Coldplay on the weekend, and they were, thrilled.
Wow.
Yeah, because Athens is a big international city, and so the things that you can expect to find are, plenty of things to do. So, and that was my first opera, and I think all of the students who went to the opera with me, it was their first experience too. And it was in the theater just down from the Acropolis, so the scene could not have been better.
What courses are you offering for this trip?
Well, it's writing 398, so it counts for credit toward the writing or rhetoric major and the various minors that we offer too. But it's also available as an upper division humanities elective. And so the students who went on the trip this time, only one was actually a rhetoric major. We'd love to have more, but they were all over the map in terms of majors, and all of them, to the very one, said that this was an experience that, they will cherish for their, that they got a lot out of it, even if it wasn't in their major. Yeah, it's really just starting with a book that is a popular history called Why the Greeks Matter, and it is a wild romp through various aspects of Greek culture that students really find engaging, because it's about sports, not just politics, but sports, culture, life in general, and getting a sense of what it was like 2,500 or so years ago, the period that we're most concerned with, the classical period. Yeah, what students can expect to do in the course is read the book, just to prepare them for, to give them enough context to really enjoy and appreciate the sites. But I know that we visited about 22 sites in our 2-week journey, and visited a lot of museums. Every single day we visited at least one museum, usually 2. So most of the learning is really happening on site, going to those visits, reflecting on what they've seen and what they've learned from it. And then in the end, students create a multimodal sort of travelogue of their adventure. So they're pulling together various pictures, maybe video, and reflective writings, and just pulling it all together to say, here's a snapshot of what this learning experience was like. So that's mostly what they're doing, with a little bit of, each student was also responsible for doing a reading associated with a given site so that they could provide context to the rest of the class. So that's where we get the rhetoric part of the class mostly, is through seeing what ancient writers and thinkers, anywhere from philosophers, poets, politicians, whoever, had to say about the sites that we're visiting. So it gave it a little bit richer connection to the students.
What historical or famous landmarks can students expect to see while in Athens?
Obviously the Acropolis, because that's the biggest one, right? And that's the most popular attraction. We were lucky that we got to see that this year because the second week that we were there, it was closed during sometimes because of the heat. But we were lucky. We got to the Acropolis Museum and the Acropolis site, which is, everything that you expect it to be. Delphi is another amazing site, and the valley to Apollo is also just exquisite, because they've kept it as ancient as they can in terms of making sure that you don't see signs of modernity at the site. It's at Mount Parnassus, and that's a favorite of a lot of students. Also, the ancient theater at Epidaurus, 2,500-year-old theater that's acoustically perfect and still intact, and you can see performances there. During the time that we're going, we won't be able to see performances at that site, but I have actually gotten to see a Sophocles play there when I went on my own a few years ago, and it was one of the single most magical experiences of my life. But even just being there during the day and standing at the site where you can hear your own voice from, way up in the amphitheater is pretty exciting. There are too many sites to mention, really, but Mycenae also, which is the oldest site that we visit, it's 8,000 years old. You see just a very different sort of culture than you see in any other part of Greece that we visit. And that was another thing that students remarked on in their reflections, is just the diversity of landscape and the types of sites that we saw, some of them, on mountaintops, but others, with all the treasures buried within. So there's just a lot of ground that we cover, and we really take in a lot in 2 weeks. It's a busy 2 weeks, but there's also free time built in, so students can, expect to take advantage of that as well.
Why do you think the Greeks' influence is still important today?
Well, I think it's not just the obvious that we sort of borrowed their democracy. We combined it with the Roman version, but I think also just our educational system, the idea of a classical, well-rounded education, the liberal arts, is still very much alive. Or we're trying to keep it alive, certainly. And so our whole educational system is based really on what they call the enkouklios, and the paideia, the well-rounded education, and the also just culturally, our sporting life is built very much on the Greek model, and that was another thing that students enjoyed experiencing firsthand. Is all of the ancient sites had sites for athletic competition as well as, and poetry was included in those competitions too. So we're very indebted to the Greeks, well beyond just the obvious, I think. So we also, by the way, stayed at the right near the ancient Olympic Stadium. So that was something that we went to every single day, and so it was a constant reminder of that past. And everywhere you go, wherever you're walking in Athens, you're seeing sites along the way that archaeologists are still working, or where they've already excavated the site. And so it's seeing the mix, the juxtaposition of the modern and the ancient is a really wonderful thing too, that a lot of students found intriguing.
So why do you think the study abroad experience is an opportunity that students can't miss?
I think Greece, because it's not where it all began. I mean, that's a myth, right? That's a myth that the Greeks have helped create too. But I think that just because it is such a bedrock civilization for Western civilization, and also really for Eastern too, because we forget how close to what we think of as the East Greece really is. It's the easternmost part of Western Europe, really. Turkey is just across the water from there. So it's a critical place in history and also contemporary geography. I think that just because it dominates so much of what we think of as Western civilization, right? We can trace so much of what we do now and how we think now to thinkers and poets and playwrights and philosophers of that era, of the classical era in particular. So I just think that if you really want to go to the source, you go to Greece.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that's really important you think about this trip?
Well, let's see. I think students should know that the trip is very guided, not just by me, but by archaeologists who are very, very knowledgeable about specific sites there. So I am not an archaeologist. My specialty is in rhetoric and writing, but we are going to be led by people who have been doing this. I mean, the group College Year in Athens has been doing this for more than a century, and the people who lead us on our various excursions are specialists in different aspects of Greek history and culture. So, for example, we'll be led by one person who takes us through most of the museums in Athens, but we'll be led by different people who are specialists in either ancient Greek religion or, in fact, that reminds me, one of the most important sites for a lot of students, or at least it was a very significant site, was Corinth. And the person, Despina, the archaeologist who led us on that site, just made it very, very engaging for us, because she took us directly to the spot where St. Paul preached the gospel for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And even to non-believers in the group, it was still just kind of a heart-stopping realization to be at the exact spot where something that obviously has had repercussions.
Has there been any students that have been influenced by this trip to do something with their lives that's very relevant to how their trip went? Or
I'm not sure yet because I think, well, a couple of them said that they want to go back and maybe study in Athens, which is a great thing. I mean, I met up with the students who we had a little reunion this fall, just to see each other again. And I mean, they're still very excited about the trip and still talking about it as like a life-changing adventure. One student said, "I don't even know what it's like to get up and not go to a museum every day now," because that was just a ritual that we were doing, and you know, something that they were just really got a lot out of. So I think that I think this will last a long time for everyone, but some of the students who were studying or planning to study medicine were surprised by how much they learned about ancient medicine and how that really, you know, connected for them, just the debt that we owe to the Greeks there too. Most students were really surprised at how advanced Greek technology was, just being impressed by the culture.
Yeah.
So, modern and ancient, by the way.
Yeah.
People were really impressed by modern Greece as well as ancient Greece. And we're so pleased to see, you know, how friendly and polite people were, because as you may know, there are lots of places in Europe right now where Americans are not really, or tourists in general, are not being welcomed so much, and Greece is not one of them. So they're still very happy to see American tourists, and they were when we're not tourists, we're, you know, these are students, but they're still interacting with locals as they would be as tourists. But yeah, they were very impressed with the food, with the ease of transportation, how inexpensive it is really to get around and to eat and buy souvenirs and things like that. So this group really came away thinking this was a great experience, and they all said that they would tell their friends to take it too, so counting on them.
Do you know of any scholarships that are available?
Well, the College of Liberal Arts now has some scholarships for study abroad, as you probably know. My own department, Writing and Rhetoric, also has some scholarships, but those are for people who are majoring or minoring in rhetoric. But still, there's never a better time to take on a rhetoric major or minor as well.
Rebs, if you're interested in going to Greece, please talk to Dr. Green, contact her, get to know her. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you. Go to Greece.
Yeah.